Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are here. I'm Senya. We're here with Kelly Beischel, and today is Friday. We are in week X of people working from home, about week 4 or week 5, depending when you started. And we're all working remotely, and we want these work remote strategies, so things that are going to help us with different parts of working remotely. And today's session is on when you are in charge of a group or a meeting, or even when you're not in charge, how can you do it to help deep learning? Today's session with Kelly is all about deep learning. We're super excited to welcome Kelly. This will be concise, and this will be 20 minutes. At the end, we'll take Q&A, so you can put your question in either into the Q&A or into the chat at any point. We welcome you. We'll be doing this every day at 11 a.m. Pacific for the month of April. Kelly, we are thrilled to welcome you about deep learning. Hello and welcome.
Thank you, Senya. This is one of my favorite topics. My PhD is in teaching and learning, and I was a university professor for 11 years before I started coaching. So this is near and dear to my heart. So this can be whether you're leading meetings or presentations or team leading or what have you, and all the concepts are still the same. No matter if you're in a meeting and you're trying to lead it, you're hoping that your participants do some deep learning in there, right? Because then they can incorporate it into their position. So whether it's that you're standing at, typically you'd be standing at the front of the room or, around a circle at a meeting. So I would love if at the end of this, you knew 3 learning principles to guide teaching and learning and leading, and then compare and contrast 3 different strategies for deep learning. I would love it if you felt empowered to try new techniques the next time that you were teaching or leading, and if you would integrate 3 strategies into your remote meetings, classrooms, or webinars. So there's a reason you showed up today when you heard about that this was the topic. And so I would love it if you would write in the chat box what you're hoping to take away today, or what is most important that you learned today. And then we'll address those. But I'm gonna keep going while you chat, you type that in. And one of the fears that a person presented to me when she needs to present remotely, she usually does it on campus, like on in corporations, and she said, how, I don't know if I can keep their attention, and how will I keep it engaged when I'm online? And my response to her is to challenge a bit back to say, how is it any different teaching remotely versus in person? When I was at the university, students would be on their phones and what have you. And so I still had to keep them engaged when I was in person. So they can do all kinds of things, be on their computer, acting like they're taking notes, and be on Amazon. So I had strategies for that when I was in the classroom. They used to have to bring donuts if they were on their phones during class, and I caught them. So we ate donuts a few times, and then nobody did that. But you can't do that remotely. So, so the key is to plan to teach or to lead a meeting as you would for any other interactions, but you just need to think to plan it and then say, okay, how will I incorporate certain interactions throughout my presentation or my meeting? If there's any way, if you're leading a team and you would do a PowerPoint presentation typically, and then have discussion, could you do the PowerPoint presentation and do a talk over and then send that out so that then they could come to the meeting and remotely and then do the discussion and questions around it. So that you're not talking at them with the PowerPoint, that instead, when you're having video time, like what we would call face-to-face time, that then you could use that exploring and getting into good discussions and collaboration and things like that, rather than, I call it PowerPoint karaoke. So, but this is a big takeaway I'd love for you to have. The value of what you're presenting, your presentation or your meeting, is not based on what you say, but rather what your participants do after you say it. So I'll say that again. The value of your presentation or your meeting is not based on what you say. It's what your participants, whoever they may be, your team, do after you're finished saying it. So, so we're always begin with the end in mind. What is it you want them to leave with? And that's how you guide what you're going to say. So I always do the know, feel, do. And so that's always guiding me. I had to take pages and pages out of this because those were my know, feel, do. And I wasn't going to divert to that from that. So because if we do, then we dilute the information and it just becomes surface learning. And the minute they walk out, they will have forgotten. So the other is begin with what is most important always, to the learner. So like I asked you, what's the most important that you're coming away with? Number one, it brings their intention to the meeting or the presentation. And that way their brain is in tune to that. And they're always like listening for the answer. Like, are they going to say that? Is that part of this? Is it not? So they're going to stay engaged. And then again, stick to the most important information and rather than diluting the message. Some of the learning principles is that knowledge consists of networks of neurons, and your network is different than the learner's network. And so be sure to use their network. And we'll get into strategies of how to do that. Explaining doesn't work. That's why I don't know what class you've been in, but let's say it was history for me, and they just went on and on and on, just told me all these facts, and and yeah, it doesn't work. So they have learned that our brain just doesn't just absorb things that explain. And I'm also a nurse, and this explains a lot of why people don't change their behaviors when they're taught about health concerns, right? You're taught not to use too much salt, but do you? Yes, we all do. So, so explaining it doesn't work. The other is you need key factors in learning are meaning and practice. So the material must have meaning to the learner, and the material must be practiced for active teaching principles or strategies. So we need meaning. Again, it's another way when I asked you in the beginning, what are you looking for? And, so that you're attaching what I'm saying to something that you need. So that's bringing some meaning, and then practice what you're doing. So a big one that a lot of people forget is to engage emotions to increase memory and meaning. So our emotions are an integral aspect of our neural operating system. So brain chemicals, neurotransmitters, and neuropeptides are released from neurons, and they're transmitted to the brain and body. From excitement to calm, from depression to euphoria, these chemicals influence how we think and how we behave. And that makes sense, right? Because it's telling us, stay in the cave, stay in the cave. There's a saber-tooth tiger. You should not go out there, and our fight or flight comes up. And so those are from brain chemicals telling our body to, how to react. Our emotions also speed our thinking in those kind of immediate emergent times, and they help us focus our reason and our logic. They're also used to increase our deep learning. And the amygdala, so when we have an emotionally charged event, the amygdala that's kind of under here is buried in the brain. There's actually two of them on each side, and they're activated by intense emotion. So if you don't bring emotion into what you're talking about, it will go and people will just turn off. So you want to increase the dopamine into the system so that, because the dopamine is going to help the learner with their memory and information processing. So it's like giving the brain Post-it notes to say, remember this, remember this, remember this, every time you evoke an emotion. Unfortunately, right now, we're able to evoke a lot of emotion. And so you have to be careful about which kind of emotion you're evoking now, I think. So our brains also don't pay attention to boring things. Like if you think this is boring, you are tuning out, right? So we need to make sure that the interest in the subject at hand is foremost. And so we need arousal towards that material to get people excited about it. So how do you do these things? So how to evoke emotion. So if you want something like wonder or fascination, you might do some problem-based exercises or case studies. You know, whatever you're an expert in, you could probably just at the top of your head write a little case study about the material, about how it didn't go so well and how it went well, or whatever, or to try to evoke some emotions. Anecdotes, so stories, narratives are wonderful to arouse emotion. Paradoxes, you know, so the opposites. Suspense or surprise, if you want them to be suspended, you could have or evoke a sense of suspense. You could have examples of unexpected findings. Again, case studies are fantastic for all kinds of emotions. Fascinating facts that they wouldn't actually believe is true. And so then they're waiting to hear, is that really true? Right? Compassion, photos, videos, simulations, things to bring compassion out. If that's what, you know, in nursing, I did that a lot for my students, right? Because I want them to be compassionate to their patients. And it was really important. The other is to increase alertness because like we said, the brain doesn't pay attention to boring things. So we want to evoke curiosity or create what they call is a knowledge gap. So at the beginning, you might even ask, or as you're talking, you know, when would you use this information? Or how will this help you do your work? And so then they'll pay attention and think, oh, well, how will that happen? Or how will I use that? And so then again, it brings meaning back. And again, what are you hoping to learn? The other is use a hook to evoke emotion and to get them to pay attention. And, you know, there are a lot of hooks in our media, right? Headlines hook us. Social media hooks us to listen up. So it's like telling the brain, listen, you need to pay attention to this, right? And we may need to do the hook to increase the alertness at least on a normal time, in normal teaching. What they say in neuroscience when you're teaching is to do either hook or some kind of awareness technique or alertness technique every 12 to 15 minutes that we phase out after 15 minutes. I would say it's a lot sooner now because a lot of our thoughts are being scrambled, right? Because we're worrying. So I would do it maybe every 10 minutes. So, and I'll do the change up techniques in a minute. The other is if you're doing these things and you can't get participation, whether you're doing it together, you know, in face-to-face or remote, ask questions and then allow for silence. And even if 30 seconds, well, I won't do that now because I'm on a time clock. But we have to be silent and give people a time to process, because some people who are introverted, so they think, you know, inside. I'm extroverted, well, kind of both, but I think out here, I process out here. People who are processing in here need a minute to consider the answer, right? But a lot of times we presenters and teachers, we just want to like bleh to everybody, and we want to give them the answer because we are uncomfortable with that silence. But be silent, allow people to speak up. And if they catch on that you're going to be silent until somebody speaks up, people will start speaking up. If that doesn't work, perfect is Thinkpairshare. So you ask a question and you have them think about it. And then they're going to pair off maybe, and just, you know, you could do like the group, I think breakout rooms, and you could separate them in pairs, right? And you can have that set up before you start. And then they talk about it, what they each came up with the answer. And then they come back and then they share it, because a lot of us don't want to pipe up and say something that is wrong. But if we say it to a partner and it was right, we're more likely to share it to the group. It is my go-to, and it's never, ever, ever failed me. So try that. It's fun. Again, case studies are another good thing. Collaboration aids in problem solving. So you can put them in breakout rooms and give them directions, things that you want them to solve before they come back. And collaboration has a high correlation to learning. Another person came to me and said, well, how do you know they're getting it when you can't see their faces? For one, put them on video, right? Or they have to answer in chat boxes, or, screen share or whatever. So expect from them, like set it up that you're in expectation that this is, a two-way street, and that, and they'll catch on to that. But yeah, you have to get creative with that one, because you can't really see the light bulbs if they're not on video. Use change-up techniques, because they can't pay attention for longer than 15 minutes or 10 minutes now. A couple principles that make sure that activity is directly related to the material and that it reinforces what you're trying to do. Give explicit directions. What is it that you want them to do or accomplish during whatever, like if it's a collaboration time? And then always debrief after completing the activity to be sure that they got what they needed from it. You can break up and have them, compare notes of things that they've heard from you, and bring it back. You could ask them to talk to one another, or in the chat room, what's the best idea that you've learned so far, and how will you apply it? You can do an agree, a disagree. So have them stand up if they agree, sit down if they don't agree. And then that's also movement in the body, right? To increase alertness. And then ask them to draw. Now, see, I was just gonna say draw a picture, but don't tell adults to draw, because everybody acts like they don't know how to draw. For some reason, people get scared about drawing. So ask them like a graphic representation or a non-linguistic representation of what you've presented, or their ideas around it, and give them time to do that. It's fun, and they'll begin to see their gaps, or maybe they'll see connections that they didn't know that they had. When in person, I like to toss something. So I always had like dog toys, and never that I'd let my dog use them. It's just for class, and kind of reset their attention. And so they would be alert. I mean, they would know it's coming, but if you can't do that online, right? But humor is great to get their attention or to increase arousal. You could switch to a video clip, or like a comic, or a meme. So that could increase their arousal, right? And then even though it's like every 10 or 15 minutes, you're inserting one of these things, that just to pay attention to their attention. If you see it waning, either take a break or insert one of these change-up techniques, and get them invite them to write in the chat box. Break them up into breakout rooms so that they can discuss things themselves, and then bring it back and discuss it with the group. Use emotion to evoke memory and meaning, and get them active with the material, and collaborating with one another. So those were strategies for creating deep learning. And I know I spoke a mile a minute, but I was trying to be sure that I was respectful of your time. And I hope that you have come away with a few strategies to increase deep learning.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Kelly, you did this last time, and could you do this again at the end of this one? Could you summarize some of these strategies, or just hit on about 3 of them that you especially like, just to give people kind of a closure of some of them, because you've given us so many.
Yeah. So begin with the end in mind before you even start. What is it you want them to take from it? And then be sure to evoke emotion around it so that it goes in deeper, in deeper memory. And the emotion can be graphics, it can be a video, it can be a case study, but be sure to evoke some kind of, emotion around the material. And then turn off the explaining and let them explain back, or have them talk to each other about the material. And that can be chat room, that could be breakout rooms. But when they're talking about it, again, it's going deeper.
Speaking of that, all of you who are on the call, would you please put in what your takeaway is so far for one small new step that you will add to your next meeting? And it could be something you've never heard about, or it could be something that's just a reminder of something that you have heard about before. So would you please let us know what is a small action you will be adding to your meetings? Kelly, we have a few comments for you already as people are typing that in. So first of all, one person said, this is on the Facebook group, love that you shared the value of introverted thinking and giving time to process. So this person just really thought that was helpful. Here are some of the things at the end that people are liking. Using break rooms. So yes, and I would just say to this person who made that comment, we are now in the Zoom era. We all have break rooms. And I think we're all hesitant to try it. So try it with a safe group first. Try it with a group of about 6 people, break them up into 2 rooms of 3. So try it small and just see. You'll see that they get value out of it. And then you'll be comfortable doing that in a 10-person, a 15.
It's super easy. The first time I did it, I was really nervous, but
exactly, because we don't know, are we going to get the technology? Which break room should I be in if I'm leading? So please try it small.
Yeah.
And another comment we're getting right now is having students to discuss among themselves, students or participants to get that more deeply. Here's a question for you. And I sort of my question, if I do only one of these things, Kelly, so if I walk away and I'm going to lead, what is the one that I should absolutely make sure to do?
It's so hard.
I know.
Get them active. Don't be the PowerPoint karaoke person. Let them.
That's awful. I've never heard that term. That really frustrates me. So me singing Grease and singing Madonna, don't do that, right? I get it.
But reading from slides doesn't go to deep learning, but having them connect what they're learning or what they're hearing to themselves and how they're going to use it is key.
Got it. Okay, so make them do that, in a sense, like the Socratic method, make them present it.
Yeah, look, if I was teaching a mechanic about their heart and how it works, then I've had to do that, right? And so I would relate it to like the engine in their car, right? So it's like, and then I'd have them explain it back to me that way. And, then they get it because it's on their terms. It's at their network.
For context, for people who may have joined us right after the beginning, Kelly has a PhD in education and nursing. She is a nurse before becoming an executive coach. So when she says she's explaining to a mechanic how the heart works, she actually means that. This is not something I might say. Yeah, that's a really good example. Here are a couple of other comments for you. Oh, and one comment and one question. So another comment is, sorry, it went so fast. Another comment is remembering the power of emotion really is helpful to a person.
Absolutely.
And one other person has said that shift in curriculum delivery in terms of doing break rooms has been really helpful for people. And here's a question for you. Sometimes I lead a conversation. I just wanted to say to everybody, just so you know, the 20 minutes was the end of our formal. This is the Q&A. So stay if you want to. Go get to your work and to planning your next presentation if you want to. And thank you for joining us. Okay, moving on to the question. Sometimes I lead a conversation on an online e-list for students. How do I keep them engaged? Most of the time they will post once and then they're quiet. Do the same principles work in terms of an online e-list? What an interesting question.
E-list.
Like a Slack or something where a lot of people are in the same group. Someone might post a question, and then how do you know if that person's engaged once you post part of your answer?
So and this may not be, but tagging people is important because otherwise people have to like keep coming back to see if there's an answer, so tagging people so that they get the notifications, because I've noticed sometimes that happens and you don't really realize that somebody's waiting for you to answer it. So, and it says for students. So so if you have some type of rubric, if you start with, this is how we're going to conduct this. I mean, I know at work, maybe you're not able to do that, but, or if you're just presenting one time, but if you need to begin with a rubric. So these are the expectations, that you will comment 3 times and make your own post once or something, so that, give them guidelines about what you want them to do, and maybe create teams outside of it that they bring in as a team. They're discussing it.
Oh, I have seen that work really well, where the content is taught in an interactive way, and then you have a follow-on session where the team brings their own issue, but using that same content. Yeah, I know what you mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you're saying to this person about the e-list, maybe there's something that they can bring in terms of what they need specific,
Mm-hmm.
and have that be discussed.
Yeah. And just be sure to state your expectation. And if people aren't participating, if something, be honest, like, what's going on? What else? What's underneath this? Because maybe their emotions are so high, they don't even, this is not registering to them,
Mm-hmm.
So what else is going on? Or, what can I do? Or what do you need?
Yeah, I was just recently texting with somebody who leads a lot of meetings, and he was saying that at the beginning of each call, he does a health check, like just going around, how are we all doing? And then a silliness check, like what is something silly that's happened, just to distract before getting down into the business meeting content.
Yeah, that is great.
I have one more question for you before we close out. What was the hardest of these for you to start to implement?
So the hardest part for me is actually not speeding through material.
Same here.
So that, because there's a lot of content, but anyway, and because I'm all about the activities, and then I run out of time.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, like determining what exactly is the meat, and really how much time do I have?
No, me too. I speak very quickly sometimes when I'm giving these presentations or online presentations, because I know the content, but other people need that pause, just like you're saying, that silence, like you've said.
Right. That, and, I'm just so passionate about, I always want to tell everything. So, but putting the activities in does decrease the time. I mean, increases the amount of time. So you have to decide what's most important.
What's priority?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. We have one last comment as this was coming in, and then I'm going to thank Kelly, which was, people don't need too many ideas at once either. They can take that sprinkled in.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Because then it just muddles everything, right? And the brain can't keep up.
We want that clarity. We want that. Here's the main takeaway. Exactly. Right. Thank you so much, Kelly. We look forward to seeing you again on these calls. We do these every day for the month of April at 11 a.m. Pacific for 20 minutes. Thanks so much, Kelly. Thank you.
No, thank you. Take care. Bye.